what, full screen here? Nope.
Yeah. It's on.
Okay. Enter full screen.
All right.
All right. I hear my reverb here. Hopefully that'll go away. But we have a really big crowd here. You guys, what'd you think of the film?
Hey guys. Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
So I have a few questions for you. Then I'm going to turn it over to this audience. Hopefully they'll ask some things that are represent us well. I always get nervous, you know.
No reason to be nervous. It's all good. Just a conversation.
Well, so I've had the pleasure of watching 2 of your films 2 nights in a row. So I saw Armadillo last night. I saw this right when it came out. I saw the trailer and just thought, oh my gosh, I got to see that movie. I'm curious about, this is your first narrative film, you made 2 documentaries prior. Including, maybe you could share a little bit about the experience of Armadillo and some of the other films. And I'm curious about how this came to you or how you came to it and what that transition was like going from documentary to narrative.
Yeah, so that's 3 or 4 questions in one.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. We'll go for it. Well, I mean, Armadillo was a very intense movie, and you know, it followed a platoon of Danish soldiers to the front line throughout the deployment back in 2009 in Afghanistan and Helmand, when some of the most sort of intense fighting was going on at that time. And it was kind of a deep dive into, you know, the psychology of violence, war, soldiering as a frontline account. I mean, they go through some quite horrific experiences. They come up very close with the enemy, and they end up in a situation that kind of, you know, which can be discussed whether it's a legit firefighter, whether they actually go into a blood rush and a killing frenzy. So that was, for me as a filmmaker, you know, as much as it was, you know, politically charged and extremely controversial, particularly in Scandinavia, it was also a very, you know, interesting. And I know it sounds perverted to say that it's very interesting to document someone killing on tape, but the fact that, you know, these young kids kind of transitioned in a kind of a gray zone between reality and their own fiction of themselves, or their own capacity for making sense of what they're doing and what they were expected to be doing, and you know, was just such a raw documentation of reality and of cinematic reality. So when that film came, and I'm saying all these things because they actually have an importance to the way that I conceptualize BORG McENROE.
Yeah.
But just to stick with the kind of the story of it. So when Armadillo came out, it was very big in Europe. It won an award in Cannes. It had a little bit of a tough time transitioning across the Atlantic because it was the same time as an American documentary called Restrepo came out, and those 2 films are in many ways very similar, except Restrepo is kind of the flip side of the coin. Armadillo is like the darker version of Restrepo. Yeah. Not that Restrepo isn't a dark movie, but it's still, you know, it looks at soldiers being killed, which is basically a heroic act, rather than soldiers killing, which is kind of the opposite of that. I mean, in a kind of stereotype way of talking about it. So the award in Cannes was just, you know, kind of got me signed with CAA in LA, and they started sending me projects. It kind of coincided with me coming to New York for other reasons at that time. So I got very involved in the American industry, and slowly was trying to write projects and was sent projects. One of my first meetings ever coming to the States was with Scarlett Johansson for a movie. And I'd never done any narrative features before I came out of documentary. So for me, that was just absolutely crazy. And so time went on, and there was a lot of talks and a lot of projects that almost came together, and then they didn't come together. And then I was, attached to a project called Galveston, which was written by Nick Pizzolatto, who no one knew of Nick Pizzolatto at that time. It was just before he wrote True Detective, first season. And then I kind of made friends with Nick, and he brought me on to direct an episode of the second season. So that was actually kind of the first narrative, although it was a televised, a series, it was kind of the first sort of real, say, fiction I directed.
Sure.
And the projects kept flowing in, and suddenly one day there's this script called BORG VS MCENROE on my desk, and it came from a Swedish production company. And I thought, and I had two thoughts. First of all, I thought, why would I direct a film essentially about a Swedish tennis icon? I'm not Swedish. About a time where I was 6 years old. About a sport that I'm not really that interested in. I wasn't a tennis fan. And I thought, fuck, this is like the film about the biggest Swedish sporting icon ever. It's bound to get made. I got to do it. No, that's half the truth. But the other thing was, I really was interested in the idea of a psychology of a man that wants to be the best in the world. What does it take to become the best in the world? And remembering enough to know a little bit of the story of John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg, they was complete, perfect opposites on a superficial level. And this kind of ice and fire personalities and the clash between them, I was very drawn to that. And then I read the first line in the script, which was written by this young Swedish screenwriter who'd only ever done one movie before. And it was the description of Borg standing on his balcony, and he hoists himself up on the railing and looks into that abyss underneath him, and you don't know if he's going to throw himself over, what's going to happen, and he starts, pulling himself up, doing push-ups on the railing. And I thought, wow, this is exactly what the soldiers were doing when they were killing these people in the ditch in Armadillo. It's kind of it's a fix, it's a drug, it's adrenaline, it's toying with death, and it's trying to feel, that intensity through a certain sort of proximity to death. And that tone just kind of filtered all the way down through the script.
Sure.
And all these other things then kind of stirred up in the story. So, then I decided to make it. I knew I had these Swedish producers coming down to visit me. So I got a girl, really good looking girl that I know, to come over and pretend that she was my assistant so I could look like a big shot. And then they were very impressed about True Detective, and then they hired me to do the movie. So
that's a good angle. I like that. Well, the film's great, and actually watching both of them, because I really got, I felt a lot of similarities, and I felt a lot of some, I noticed, you have that amazingly powerful shot at the end of Armadillo in the shower. Mm-hmm. It's a very similar shot with McEnroe in the shower, and this sort of slow motion shower in this one. Yeah. That was really fun, just to kind of have this sort of Metz festival that I'm having.
I can't really do another shower scene. It's like it's over for me now.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know what it is, what it is about naked men and showers in my movies.
I don't know. I like it. I don't know. So tell us about the big, great grand finale, the final match, and shooting that, and the actual sort of physical production of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to have a script where the entire third act is pretty much a tennis match. You know, that we all know how it's going to end. I mean, everyone, or at least most people, know that Bjorn Borg won that final.
Can I just say I didn't when I first watched
50% of the people that would be interested in going and watching what is, bound to be launched as a tennis movie, even though I'd argue it's hardly, justified to describe it as a tennis movie. It's more like a psychological thriller, played out on a tennis court. It's like saying Whiplash is a movie about a drummer, But to have to stage a third act, which we know is going to be about 25 minutes at least, around a tennis match where there's hardly any dialogue and it's just two actors that never played tennis in their life, having to look like the best tennis players in the world of all time, at least up until Federer and Nadal came along, and make that feel dramatic and tense. And I mean, that was a huge challenge, and obviously music plays a big part of it. It kind of, the whole idea of the tennis match is that it needs to be transcendent and be about something else than tennis. It needs to be about the moment where you break through a wall within yourself and become one with some sort of deeper longing or deeper, demon, or all of your life has to come together into this single moment, and it's, if you study tennis, and the film starts with a quote by, that we've borrowed from Andre Agassi's biography called Open, which describes tennis as the loneliest sport in the world. I'm sure some boxers would contend that, or marathon runners or something like that. But this is how tennis players like to mythologize themselves. And it's definitely true. I don't know how many people in the audience play tennis, but it's like, it's excruciating. The kind of, the concentration and the intensity you have to stir up with yourself to win a tennis match, which is decided sometimes on a knife's edge, is incredible. And these guys do it for 5 hours. So what really separates the best from the second best is just that ability to will yourself. And that comes from, the film argues your entire lifespan, your experience, all the things that you had to pull together to become that person. And that's dangerous, of course. It's like, to me, these guys are they're like soldiers in a war zone, or great artists, or great actors, and then we can talk about Shia LaBeouf and how he works as an actor, etc. But you're toying with it. You're toying with fire, and I think what happens, at least my interpretation of it, what happens was that was the last match that Bjorn Borg could play. After that, it was over for him. He was burned out. There was nothing. He was just, he's like a soldier that's coming from the war. It's just 1,000-mile stare and emptiness, and the drugs don't work anymore. He's got to find something else to do in his life. And he's been, until this, I mean, I met him numerous of times, obviously, because his son is in the movie. That's the youngest version of Bjorn. That's his own son.
Wow.
Like the kid.
Yeah, so, I noticed actually the name. I noticed it, and it didn't.
Yeah, it was an amazing thing to have that happening for the film, because for me, that's the best part of the film. That's that kid, because I think there's so much authenticity to him.
Sure.
But so Bjorn was on set on numerous occasions, and he's very, very tormented still from those days, and a lot of those guys are. I mean, McEnroe's managed to uphold his own delusions about himself till this day. But if you look at someone like Boris Becker, he's an addict. He's a gambler. He sits around in cheap casinos. He's wasted all his fortune away. He can't walk anymore. So they really, I mean, these are a particular breed of athletes that just really burnt their candles at both ends. Particularly at this time. I mean, it's also a portrait of a time and of sport at a time where it was less protected and more accessible to what it is today.
Going back to what you said, when I saw it the first time, I remember McEnroe winning. And I didn't have the recollection that he first lost to BORG. And so at the end, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, he went the year after.
Wait, that's not what I remember. Yeah, so it startled me. Anyway,
I didn't tell you about I mean, I guess that film students, I'm being all philosophical here, but really we should talk about how the thing is shot. What we did.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, shooting that match was setting up sort of a track for the players, for the actors. We had very short time for this movie. I mean, it's made for very little money. Right. It's made for, I think the budget is around 10 million, not even, like 8 maybe. If you translate, it's a Swedish movie, so the budget is Swedish, and I don't exactly know what the translation of that means, but it's probably $8 million, which is nothing for in America. It's quite a lot in Europe. I mean, I know you can make cheaper movies, but then you need to have crews working for nothing and small sets, and you can't probably afford to pay for Shia LaBeouf and Stellan Skarsgård.
I can't imagine making this movie for less. Absolutely.
No, the point of it is we had very little time, so we needed to be super efficient, and we developed this strategy. First of all, neither Shia nor Sverre could play tennis. They prepped like mad. I had them Sverre did an 8-month prep, playing tennis, exercising, physical training every day, special diet to transform his body. Shia did 5 months. I mean, usually if you get actors at that level, they'll give you a couple of weeks if you're lucky, or they rock up on the first day of shoot. It's like, and first time he called, he's a very obsessive guy, and he was like, I can give you 5 months. Is that enough? I was like, sure. Yeah, it's pretty good. So it was like, only problem is, McEnroe was the best left-handed tennis player to have ever played the game. I'm right-handed. How are you going to fix that? Well, I mean, I guess you're going to have to train with your left, and then we can flip a couple of images here and there to make it look like you're holding the racket in the right hand. So they had a big training regime, and then they had body doubles, and then we studied the exact points of the crucial moments in the game, what they looked like, and we made them imitate that without a tennis ball. And then we made them move. We had it timed out on a sound cue. So they would run around the court and they would go doo, 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 beep, doo, doo, beep. And then the body doubles, which were professional tennis players, would come in and do the exact same thing. So we'd use the doubles and the wides and the actors in the close-ups. And through that very intense prep, Sverre and Shia managed to have ground strokes that could sell in close-ups.
Right.
There's hardly any images of them which is larger than waist and up. I think there are a few, and we had some crucial moments like when you see the crane shots where we used facial replacement. Mm-hmm. So it's actually the body of the double and then the face of the actor. So we instilled these moments. We said, okay, we're going to sell a wide shot or like a full-size shot with face replacement so that it sticks in the head of the audience that, Shia LaBeouf actually made that serve, but it's a face replacement shot. And we were able to we had the budget to do, like 4 of those or something. And then, we would have the actors and fast cutting as well is a big trick. And then we'd insert the ball digitally after.
Huh.
Plus we had some and then we had some moments where the doubles would just impro play, like try to beat each other on court, and we'd shoot that in wide. So we'd have some good assertive shots, actual tennis balls.
Right.
So it's all cut around that. I mean, few people that went from many to a lot to few. Some people have asked whether there's any archive footage in the film, and there's none. It's all real. The only representation of the actual Björn Borg and John McEnroe are in the credit sequence with those stock shots. And that's partly because, it would be it was very expensive. That all that material is controlled by Wimbledon and IMG, and it costs lots and lots of money to buy it out. We would also have needed both Björn and John's collaboration. John never wanted to collaborate around the movie because we didn't have any money to pay him, at least not as much as he wanted.
And he didn't have a son that you could cast.
No, he didn't have a son we could cast. The story about the son is very interesting. We can get back to that. But it was also a filmmaking decision. It was like, we want people to believe that these are the guys. Yeah. We don't want them to see a picture of the real John McEnroe and then go back to Shia, and then it's like, you lose the illusion.
Oh. We lost you for a second. Yeah.
Am I still here?
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
I want to turn this over. I have one question, and as last question, and then I'll have people line up while I'm talking, so you can go right in.
Sure.
But so we've been your editor. Is your editor someone that you've worked with before? Is that a Danish person, or is that somebody that was brought onto the show by producers?
No, I've chosen all heads of department for this movie, and all cast is done by me. That's one of the big differences of making films in Europe and then in the States is you have much more creative control as a director. I have final cut. I decide who works on the movie. I decide the cast. Obviously it's a collaboration. I can't say, listen, my brother wants to be an actor. Let's put him in to play John McEnroe, But it's really the director that drives that stuff in Europe, which is less the case in America, at least not when you're talking kind of studio level films. So this is my editing team from Armadillo. It's the same 2 guys. They actually kind of swapped roles a little bit on Borg McEnroe, in the sense that the guy who we brought in as a kind of assistant editor on Armadillo was just such a great kind of action editor. Like, he edited all the fight sequences in Armadillo, so he was kind of front running Borg McEnroe and doing the tennis stuff, but he also developed so much as an editor that I kind of finished off the project with him. But these are people that I worked with many times, and the DP is a good friend of mine and a good collaborator of mine as well.
The reason I ask is we've had several. Well, we have a film that we're showing at CineSkype coming up called Strong Island, documentary Strong Island, that was edited in Denmark. And last year we showed a movie called The Last Race that was edited in Denmark.
Strong Island was edited by also a guy called Janus, I think, Janus Metz. He's like a Nestor of Danish editing. The guy that I'm working with, Per Kierkegaard, he just edited The Cave, which premiered now at Toronto and had rave reviews. Lauren Green, Ferris Fayyad's movie, who was nominated last year for the Oscars with Last Man in Aleppo. He also just edited Lauren Greenfield's new film about Imelda Marcos. So he's he's very big in the documentary community and edits a lot of big American documentaries as well.
I see a lot of great editing coming out of Denmark. And I'm not sure what's there. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think we have one film school, and it's a very good film school. They've got a lot of money, and it's 4 years, and it's all practical. And it's got the best teachers that the country can kind of pull together. And there is really, it's really a conversation constantly across all the disciplines about storytelling and about character. It's never about, you're never talking to a DOP in Denmark about his lighting package. You're talking to him about the story and the character. And then, you can branch out a little bit. But, I just worked with this French DOP on the series that I did for Amazon. It was so technical. Everything was so technical that it kind of drowned the creative side of it, and it killed the set as well. So the same thing goes for the. I mean, obviously, editors are all about story, but I just think there's a school and a line of thought in Danish filmmaking, a kind of community that allows us to grow with each other. Obviously there's also a lot of people that hate each other's guts and compete with each other, etc., as there is everywhere. But generally, I think it's a beautiful thing. People respect each other and people help each other, and even between directors, I have a couple of people I can send my scripts to and always get comments, and vice versa. So I think that there's a great respect for filmmaking as an art form, and there's a great understanding that there's no film unless you have great character, unless you know your story at a deeper level, which is not just about the bunch of guys running around trying to heist a bank and shoot up some police cars or whatever. I mean, I get sent scripts all the time from my agent that is just useless. I mean, and these are some of the best people in Hollywood, right? Or at least people that get paid in Hollywood that write this stuff. So there's a recommendation for all you film students: just do a half-assed job. Go to LA, get signed, get some money, run away. No.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to turn. We actually have a long line. If you start to, he's on the East Coast, so it's almost midnight there. So if you start to get tired and you say, "Okay, this has been great,"
I'm fired up now. I'm full of myself and my own lousy jokes. We can keep going.
Be sure to say your name. Let them know where you are in the program.
Hi, my name's Zach. I'm a junior in the program here. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And I want to say I really loved your film. So thank you for that. I play tennis myself, so that was kind of cool to see that. You don't see a ton of tennis movies, so that was really cool. And I really loved just the dynamic with tennis and kind of the inside each player's head. I thought that was just really great. I guess my only question would be, because I want everyone to have a chance to ask, but my main question would be, what would be your main piece of advice for young filmmakers like us in film school here, just aspiring to? I know a lot of us are aspiring to direct specifically, so speak to that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I guess I can, sign off on the cliches that probably so many would have told you already, but it is really true. Just make movies. Don't let anyone stop you. Just make your film. It's the only way. You can't sit around for someone else to make it happen. You're the one that's driving the car. You gotta get out there day, you can make movies anyhow, anyway. Today the technology is so cheap, the possibilities are so cheap, and it's just about doing it. And I came from, having no experience. I only began making movies when I was 28. And because I was so sick and tired of what I was doing at that time, I thought, I got to do what I really love. And someone told me, you get better at what you love doing in very short time instead of what you think you should be doing. So, not 4 years after taking that decision, I was, getting an award in Cannes. So I think, it's just staying with that passion of doing things. And then I would also say one thing that's maybe a little more useful and that's a little more practical is share your work. Don't sit on your work and be scared of showing your script to someone, or be scared of getting comments because you're sensitive about it. Share your work, get comments, get people's reactions to it. But choose the people that you want to show things to wisely, because you're going to get the reaction, you're going to get what you're asking for.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Hello, my name is Spencer Palmer. I'm a junior, and this is my first time taking a digital media essentials class. And I'm not a R-rated movie goer, but thank you for the lovely movie. And I have a lot of questions, very interesting ones. But yes, I'm going to give everybody their time. I'm just going to ask one question: what is your favorite Disney movie?
I'm not sure I know which ones are Disney movies. I love Up. Up makes me cry. I don't know if that's Disney or Pixar.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Toy Story. There's another one.
Yes, I saw Toy Story 4, and it shocked me.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, and have a good night.
You
We
too.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi there.
Hey.
So my name's Don. It's my first year in the program here. My question kind of evolved as I was standing in line. I think what I'd like to hear from you about a little bit is kind of the processes of discovery throughout production, but maybe in a more kind of practical way. If you find a certain, like, any tricks for keeping the right presence of mind, being in the right state of mind, where you see things that maybe weren't in the script that you didn't expect to come out of a performance, whether that's on the set or in editing or anything like that.
I think this is super important to film. I mean, for me, filmmaking is all about the life that you manage to create in front of the camera. It has to transpire through the camera. So I'm always looking at the script as something that is a work in progress. A draft of movie is a work in progress, all the way through, editing, sound, VFX, even afterwards, even now. My perception of my own movies change. They change when they meet audiences. So I'm never tied to. I think they're filmmakers, and they're specifically script writers and showrunners in television that are super. The script is sacred. Is holy, and everything's got to be exact. But for me, and maybe this has to do with my documentary background, is I will keep digging into a scene and I'll keep improvising around that scene until I feel it's there, and until I can see that the actors feel it's there. And I like reading sessions with actors that get us there. For instance, Shia LaBeouf and the actor who plays his dad, was put in a hotel together as father and son to kind of develop that relationship on scheduled time, not all the time, but there are reading sessions which had nothing to do with the scenes in the script, which just had to do with father and son stuff, you know, which had to do with trying to understand the relationship between John McEnroe and his dad and how that resonated through Shia and through Ian. So, and I remember, I mean, each actor is also very different. You know, they need different things from you. You know, someone like Sverre was quite, you know, intellectual in his approach, and he impersonates Björn Borg, and we could talk sort of about the character, something that was out here. Whereas with someone like Shia, it's all about the belly, and it's all about, you know, giving him stuff in character to make his character jump. So, for instance, the scene in the film where he is arguing with the journalists, you know, which I think is his best scene in the whole movie.
Yeah,
all that's improvised.
Oh wow!
I mean, we knew that we had a rough sketch of what he was going to say. You know, I had some markers for him that were in the script, but I knew that I could get him going by talking to him about his personal relationship as Shia, his personal relationship to the press, but talking to him about it as John McEnroe.
Uh-huh.
But I knew that I was talking to Shia, but I'm talking to John McEnroe, and John McEnroe's character is the same thing. So it's also about, you know, it depends on who's the actor you're dealing with, what's the moment you're dealing with. And I was winding those, you know, day players that came in to play journalists, which were actors with very little experience, just winding them up to provoke him, you know, to get him to lose his temper. And they loved it because he was pushing back at them so hard. You know, I think for the first time in their life, you know, they'd probably been on some Swedish TV shows or something. For the first time in their life, they felt, okay, I'm in a scene, in a movie, but this is very real. Yeah. I'm not sure if this guy's going to run over and punch me in the face right now.
Right.
You know? And then you start getting reactions. Then you start getting real blood and sweat and tears on the table.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, the editing comes after that, and then you have a moment to scrutinize that and fine tune and look, because then, you know, it can go left, right, and center. That's always the challenge when you open up to that kind of stuff, when you're not as controlled with your scenes. But I would also, and again, it depends completely on the actor. I just work with Andre Riseborough, who basically needs the director to be non-existent, you know, almost like it's the director's almost the enemy, you know. And then you got to respect that. You know, you can't mess with that if that's her process, if that's what she needs. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe she didn't like me, but that wasn't my impression. It was a general thing. But you know, with someone like Sverige and Stellan, there's some of those scenes they have together. You know, the fight they have in the locker room. It's also like 50% of that stuff is in the script. We knew what the scene was going to be. We knew he's frustrated. He's losing. He's telling his coach to go and talk to the officials to push the game for tomorrow, and because he feels like he's losing, and obviously his coach can't do that, and he's got to get him around, you know. And the day was heavy, you know. We'd done this kind of static stuff before that, and this is also when you realize you have good people around you. So I'm looking at my DP, and we're both like, how the fuck are we going to get this to work? And we're just like, okay, break for lunch. Everyone comes back for lunch. We're like, okay, next scene, no rehearsals, no marks, no nothing, just fucking handheld camera. We're going to observe as we go. We're going to see what happens. And the scene exploded. And it was like energy, you know, and you sit there behind the monitor and you feel it shooting at you. You know, you feel these bombs coming at you. And you generally, you know, shocked and moved, and you know, even if you redo the take, you can experience the same thing, and you can build on that, you know. And I think it's a dance. It's always a dance. And with some and other moments with Sverre and Shia, I would even interfere in the middle of a scene. I would sit down next to them and go, say it again, let me, come down, or, the moment when he's sitting there the first time on the training court and we feel that he's not feeling well, and there was a lot of words in that scene about how he was not feeling well, and as we were playing, we felt out it's not about the words, it's just about what's in this guy's eyes. And this coach knows his players so well. They don't even have to speak to each other. It's all about a gesture and a look, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's perfect. You answered my question and then some. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it. Love the film. I'll let the next person come up. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Metz.
Hi.
I'm covering my heart because I can't show where I work, but it's also because I'm about to have a heart attack. So, I didn't realize there can be a lot of people here. My first question, and I have a point to it later. I'm not going to be able to do it as well as the last fellow, but what is your favorite movie?
I have a lot of favorite movies, but one that really stands out for me at the moment is There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson. I just think they're kind of, it's very rare to see that kind of cinematic darkness and boldness, and films for me have to speak at multiple levels. They have to have deep character, but at the same time they have to be about something bigger than just than just the story. They have to transcend something, and that's a film that does that for me. Obviously, Apocalypse Now has always been one of my favorite movies, probably why I chose to make a war movie. And do you work for the Army, by the way?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry, no.
I'm very curious now, obviously.
No, they're just sensitive sometimes. That's all. I love how you keep on saying transcend. I noticed that you were saying that describing BORG versus oh gosh, see, I'm so nervous. I can't remember the name of the movie we're talking about. McEnroe. Thank you. Golly.
Yeah, the other guy.
Okay, my last question is, and this is really important to me as I want to be a director. I'm second year in the program, by the way. Did only having one writer and one director influence the film's production positively, both creatively and collaboratively?
Yeah, I think you can always only be one director. I don't know. I would never try to, tag team a movie, because it's so much about your inner thermometer in a way. You have to know when it's right. You have to see when it's there. And people, it's very, very disturbing to me with this whole video village thing that goes on in the States with all these producers sitting behind you, etc. It's a nightmare. I've learned to cope with it, but it gets me going every time, and it's really not productive. I know Martin Scorsese has like a box around his monitor because he doesn't want anyone else to see the work except on him. But he's Martin Scorsese. I don't think if Janus Metz tried to do that, he'd probably get fired on the next plane home.
Well, that's why I asked you, because I imagine that there's got to be some frustration with that. And oftentimes I'll see a film that maybe I don't care for, and I look for how many directors, how many writers, how many producers. Are there too many cooks in the kitchen? Okay, so sorry.
So in terms of writers, that's an interesting question, because writers and directors is always like a love-hate relationship, in the sense that they're writer-directors that punch out their own vision, make their own movies, go do it. I have all the respect in the world for that. Unfortunately, I haven't yet been clever enough to write my own stuff. I'm hoping the next movie is one that I've written that's gonna happen. But this particular writer is just someone that I saw eye to eye with. I mean, it was as if we came from the same piece of material. So that's also what I said in the beginning. When I read the first page in the script, I knew that this was for me. I could feel the tone of writing, the way that he chose to stage this. It wasn't a celebrational biopic about this guy. It was almost like dark. It's very dark, and in some ways almost a tragedy. But still, it came to a point where I had to take the script away from him. And this you can do in Europe because you're the director. And at the end of the day, it's, you're the one that's making the movie. You have to call the shots. So I rewrote his script. But I kind of did it in collaboration with him. And then I went off on my own and rewrote it again. And then I came back to him, and then he didn't like it. And then he was like, fuck you, asshole. And then I realized he was right to some extent. And then it kind of ended up in kind of somewhere in the middle. Like, I gave something vital to it, but it was always his backbone. It was always, what he initially wrote is kind of the backbone of the movie. That's what we all came together to do. And then it changed again once the actors come in and they start reading the lines, and you start doing, readings, and you realize, fuck, half the dialogue's got to go, or that scene is no good. And then you work it, a lot of what we did on that movie was me and the actors working it out in prep. And then you cut it, and which is a third stage of making a movie. Then it becomes something else again. But I mean, him and I, it ended up as like it's the best possible scenario you can have with a writer, when the writer comes up, because he's also a director. So he came up, he said, in every speech I had about this movie at Toronto Film Festival and wherever it premiered, I would always thank him and talk about him as the first person, because he was the reason we came together, and he is he's the one that wrote the story initially. Without him, there would be no movie. And he would say to me, and I believe that this is very honest, it's not just hot air, that you made a film that I could never have done. You elevated my script to the next level. So that's the perfect working relationship, obviously. Most often, it's not like that. So often, writers sit around, complain about what directors did to their movies, or directors, particularly in the US, because of the Writers Guild, it's very, very difficult to take a script and put your mark on it as a director and write it. Which is, in my view, a process you have to go through to make a movie. You have to make it yours. You can't just do someone else's writing.
Well, you did it well, because it was a fantastic movie. Thank you for your time. It's a cell phone company, by the way. I didn't want to keep you up at night, so that's all I'll say. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm a sophomore, I think. I don't even know. Great movie. Never seen it before. Loved it. I thought tension was great. And that's kind of what leads into my question is, so I didn't know the story at all. I was kind of rooting for McEnroe. How did you maintain that tension throughout the film, knowing that it was a historical piece? So everyone who knew that story, knew how it was going to end. How did you continue to build that up to what we now know as BORG winning the Wimbledon?
Well, I think for me, because the film is not about the match. The film is about what goes on inside the two players during the match, and what goes on inside them before and after, and how they became who they were, and how that is inserted into those crucial moments in the match. So with every good film, I think you can talk about, you know, plot, theme, and character, but if you have, you know, like action movies are very plot driven, and then the characters tend to become thin, and if they become too thin, then you quickly experience, I don't know if you share the same experience. For me, you know, 50% of the action movies I see, you know, come third act, you start to get bored. You can't see another guy getting blown up, you know. Mission Impossible, you know, who cares after a while? You know, in the beginning it's exciting because it looks great, but then it dies out. And even if you have all the tools in the world to make it look fantastic, then you start not caring anymore because they're empty characters. So this film, I mean, the action, you know, kind of takes a second. It takes the backseat for the character story. It's, you know, we even got in the middle of the final these kind of slow motion studies of the two guys, and we flash back into their childhood. Maybe it's, I don't know, you know, it might also be a little cheap to do that, but that was the choice that we made back then.
That was my favorite part. So I love that.
So I think that's the reason. I mean, it's the first thing we had to say to ourselves was, you know, this film can never be about who won the tennis match, because that's not a surprise. You know? Yeah, it's like, we know that. Yeah. It can't even be about tennis, because what does that mean? You know, it's like, no, what, you know, it's like saying, again, referring back, well, is Whiplash a film about drummers? Yeah. No, it's a film about art. It's a film about pursuing an obsession, and it's about pursuing an obsession maybe to the extent where, you know, you go too far, it drives you mad, or you have to realize that your dreams were you were misguided by your dreams, or so all good filmmaking to me is, if you don't have a proper analysis about, you know, the basic concepts of storytelling, which is, what does your characters want? What does your characters need? Is there a juxtaposition between those two things that make the person jump? That's what creates a dramatic character. And then you know, the tennis here is a stage where this drama unfolds. Could be anything, but this is tennis. And of course, it's not anything because it's tennis, because tennis is a very specific thing. You know, it's a very specific analysis of what it means to be a tennis player. Yeah. But, you know, you get my drift.
Yeah, no, I got it. Thank you so much again for your time. It's been great.
Thanks.
You. How are you holding up, Janus?
Yeah, I'll say another 10 minutes.
Okay. Right. Maybe our last question.
Hi, sorry, I'm kind of short.
Hey, a woman, finally. What's going on?
Yeah, we do have a few more in the audience.
So I'm a freshman, and it's my first year in this program, and I've made a couple of short films and weird little videos, like, just for fun, but I found that, like, when I have the idea and, like, I'm coming up with the concepts with my friends, like, that's, like, really fun, and, like, after it, like, watching it, like, it's really fun. But I found that when you're in the middle of it, it can get kind of exhausting in a way. So my question is, how do you find that motivation when you get to that point?
Yeah. No, but I think it's a very good question, because what makes you want to make movies in the first place? I mean, we all know once you try to make a movie, it's not always all that fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah. It's got a lot of glamour to it, but you're really, particularly if you start making a living from it, you know, on set, you fucking go to war every day.
Right.
And it's against the clock, and it's a big apparatus, and the nerves and the adrenaline is pumping. And I think, you know, the only thing that really, you know, I'm just so unfortunate that I know if I make a bad movie, that's the end of me. I'm too scared of people laughing at me, you know?
Yeah, that's how it goes.
but that's half the truth. Obviously, the other side of it is the beauty that you experience when everything comes together, and then it's magic, and you manage to create something that kind of transcends.
Right.
You know, this is what we live for, isn't it? So that's, I mean, I think my father's a painter, and that's a very, and sometimes I wish I was a painter too, because then I didn't have to deal with all that kind of, you know, practicality and difficulty and fights and arguments of filmmaking. But at the same time, he's alone in his studio, and I work with, you know, so many people.
Right.
And those people inspire me. And when it's great, we lift each other up, and it's a beautiful thing, as your president would have said, or whoever else.
Okay, sweet. Thank you so much. I love the movie, by the way.
Thank you.
Hi.
Okay.
Great movie. I loved it. I don't know how many student films that you've watched, but what's like the biggest folly or biggest problem you've seen with most student films, and what would you say to correct that?
I can name some.
I don't know. I don't think there's I don't really, I mean, I'm sure I've never been a teacher, so I can't like compartmentalize, you know, I can't generalize and say this is what student film is, or this is, you know, I know when I see, you know, great student films are often the ones that take chances, you know, because this is your time to take chances. You know, you're at school, for Christ's sakes. Go and do something, you know, don't be scared. Don't try to do the right thing. Try to do your thing. So that's what interests me the most, whether it's gonna, you know, get you onto short film festivals or whether you're gonna fail dramatically. That's a different question, but you know, I'd rather take a chance and fail dramatically than not take a chance. You're probably not going to win any short film awards if you don't take any chances anyway.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, don't go for the middle ground.
Right.
I've seen enough short films to say anything, but that's just what kind of guts me right now.
Take the risks. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, last question. We're gonna do last.
Okay, hey there, Janus.
Hey.
So my name is Marshall. Real fast, I just want to compliment you on that last game. I didn't breathe at all, so good on that. So my question kind of is one of the ones that like evolved as I was standing up there, and the last guy kind of made me think about something. So you just talked about like trying and failing and how you just got to do it, but I'm gonna be a little personal here. So I'm kind of an older freshman here. I kind of like dragged my feet for about 5 years thinking, you know, I don't think film's right for me. Like, you know, maybe not. But it kind of came down to like, I can't do this. And eventually I just went, screw it. Like, I gotta try. And I want to know from you, like, what was the point where you decided that like, I can do this? What was the hump you got over?
Well, my story is really, I mean, I started, you know, I was at university. I didn't go to film school myself, actually. I was at university. I studied communications. I studied literature. I studied architecture. I studied international development and politics. You know, I was just trying to picture myself as someone out there, you know, and I couldn't figure it out. And then one day, I found myself on the floor of my kitchen, and I couldn't really breathe. And this goes back to some childhood stuff. You know, my father always told me, "Don't be an artist unless you can't help yourself." So all my life, I tried not to become an artist. You know, because what does it mean you can't help yourself? But then eventually, I guess I couldn't help myself, and then I didn't stop making movies. I just got so fucking tired of thinking about what I was going to do that I stopped thinking about it. And then I started putting one foot in front of the other. And I continued my university studies. Then I went to South Africa, and then I was doing an internship with a media organization because I thought, okay, the media is kind of fun, let me try and be something in the media. Maybe I can do television. And I'd started, painting in secret, and my paintings were very bad. They all looked like my dad's.
Sure, they were good. Come on.
Then I was in South Africa, and this was in 2001, 2002, and I kind of ended up hanging out with a lot of kids that came from like the township areas, and I was hanging out with them, and they were, car hijackers, and they did, they broke into people's houses, and I thought, I'm going to make a movie about these guys. And the second I grabbed that film camera, I just felt it kind of all made sense to me. It just felt so easy. It felt like something I kind of I just found like I'd landed on my shelf. But whether that, and I guess the deeper point here is, yes, I did something. I stopped worrying about what I needed to do and stopped picturing a future for myself as that or that, and stopped making all these boxes for myself. And then I just started doing stuff. And then I found something I enjoyed. And then I think, the kind of the deeper flow of that, because I don't think it necessarily had to be, it could have been something else in filmmaking. I don't know what, but it could have been something else. But I just felt, because I loved doing it, suddenly this power of meaning, in a sense, just grabbed onto me. And I guess that's also why I can't give it up, because it's the only thing, I got to do this. Now I'm out of my despair. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
this,
I guess.
this takes me away from worrying about, myself. Now I can worry about what's in the film, and obviously that's got everything to do with me. It's you can talk about the characters that you've just seen. I mean, to me, Borg is playing tennis because he can't face himself. So he plays it so well that that's how he creates an identity for himself. So that's not the kind of 5 cent Freud on myself and in relation to my movies and my story. I don't even know if I'm answering a question here or what I'm doing.
No, you are. You absolutely are. Like it's been very insightful. Yeah.
Okay.
Striking a chord with me. So thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Don't worry too much. Go do it.
Thank you. You have a good night.
All right. Thank you so much for that, everyone. Let's give them a big hand. There you go. Give me one last look at the crowd.
Thanks.
So
My pleasure.
that was fantastic. It's a beautiful movie. Both the films, I know you've made some other films too, but those are the two I've seen, and
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan. So keep up the great work, and thank you
Thanks
so
a
much
lot.
for everything you said. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Have a
It's
good
been great.
night. Get some sleep.
You too. All right, man.
Oh, I'm going to turn this off. Stop recording.